Hello, everybody. This is Paul from the Banny Ranch Conservancy. Welcome to our webinar this evening on exploring fungi with Aaron Tupac. First thing, if you are in need of Spanish interpretation, you can click on the bottom right of your toolbar, click the word interpretation and choose Spanish. And our Spanish interpreter, Mercedes, will be there for you to listen as Aaron presents. Also, if you have questions during this presentation, if you're having technical issues or any questions that might come up, go ahead and use the Q&A icon at the bottom as well. And technical questions will be answered as we go. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll have some time for Q&A about the content of what Aaron shares. So just at the end there is when we'll get to some of those questions. So that everybody is aware, this webinar is being recorded. All the participants' cameras and audio are turned off. So the only thing being recorded will be the presentation here. And we'll be posting this to YouTube as well in English and Spanish for later reference. Let's see, what else? I'll just go ahead and introduce Aaron, who will be our presenter today. Aaron is a naturalist in our area, Southern California. He's a myconaut, an explorer of mycology. He's a community organizer whose work explores fungi and their essential role in the interconnection of all living things. Aaron is the host of a fungi-focused community education group exploring the microverse and works at the Fungal Diversity Survey on their California Fungal Diversity Survey, which is the first statewide project of its kind. Aaron is most passionate about fungi conservation at large and ecological restoration. So I will turn it over to Aaron now, and looking forward to hearing from him.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for the introduction. All right. Oh, I'm so excited to be here and speaking with y'all tonight. And thanks for coming out. This is really cool. I can talk all day about fungi, so I'll hopefully not run over too much time here, setting myself a little timer so I keep track of time. Yeah. But yeah, I have a lot to discuss and we'll kind of get into it right off the bat here. So I really love this meme that kind of describes how I feel about fungi, how a lot of credit, a lot of attention has been given to other kingdoms of life. When we think of ecology or biology, we think of plants and animals. When we think of like macro life, but actually fungi play a really important role here in our way of living, in our ecosystems and ecology. So I love this, people giving plants and animals all the credit, fungi, and fungi doing everything, and fungi literally being the foundation of all life on Earth. Kind of like that cat in the background being like, oh, I deserve attention too. And we're slowly seeing that today. And that's what's so exciting, and I'm excited to speak with everyone tonight on. Kind of getting into just briefly, like, what is fungi? Like, who are fungi? They're like a whole other kingdom of life. Since 1969, they were given their own kingdom of life, fungi. And they're not a plant, they're not an animal, but they are a fungus. So kind of getting into, I know we're diving right into what they do and how they live. So here's the fungi's ecological roles. So how fungi relate and interact with the larger ecosystems that they inhabit. Kind of broken down into two main groups. Easy to think of is that there are saprophytes or decomposers. They make the soil. They're the things that break things down and have created our soil over millions of years. And then we have the group of symbionts. So that's like thinking of like all of the fungi that are in symbiosis with other living things. So here's breaking that kind of down into the bottom here. We have parasitic fungi. Those are fungi that you may have heard recently with the ever so popular Last of Us TV show that talks about the cordyceps fungus that uses in real life an insect, an ant, or other insects to reproduce. And there are just fungi that live inside that don't quite fully, that we know of, reciprocate. So we think of those currently as parasitic, but there's all sorts of nuances. And then there are endophytes. There are fungi that live within plants, like within plant leaves and next to plant cells, walls, or inside organisms that have some kind of relationship where later in life they'll produce metabolites that benefit the organism. So for instance, let me see here. Yeah, they don't cause any disease or symptoms, but they're found in all plant species. And yeah, a really common one is the metabolites that these endophytic create, we have used as new drugs and therapies. So for instance, we have penicillin coming from the Penicillium notatum back in the 20s that had really changed the world of medicine and even changed the tides of World War I. But all sorts of different things like the anti-cancer drug Taxol is another really common example of an endophytic medicine. So there's all these things that come from these symbiotic fungi. And then there are the mycorrhizal fungi. So these are like the plant friends. They live within the roots of plants, and somewhere over 90% of plants have these mycorrhizal relationships. Here is a picture of a mushroom. This is what we typically think of when we think of mushrooms, are like the big mycorrhizal fungi. And the fun thing about mycorrhizal is myco means fungi and rhiza means root in Greek. So literally means fungus root. So kind of again, there's like the general lay of the land of fungi and kind of showing like, okay, what does a fungus look like for most of its life? Here is an example of some decomposing fungi. This is the mycelium. They can look feathery, they can look really condensed, they can look spiderwebby, but they are these like long tubules through which material, water, and microorganisms pass through. They usually are not visible to the naked eye, or they're usually underground. So a lot of these are under longs, or once you get into the soil, you'll start seeing these mycelial strands. It's so interesting. It's kind of going on to kind of how fungi evolved. And I think this is what's so interesting to me about fungi that really changed how I view the world, is how they played their role in evolution. And here's a giant picture of the many different ways of being a fungus, which we'll kind of cover through this presentation, and kind of discuss tonight how important they are in the larger evolution of things, of life. Here's an example of many different ways of fungi that reproduce. I really like this visual fungi wheel. Mushrooms are the fruiting and reproductive bodies of some fungi. Not all fungi use mushrooms to reproduce, but there are many that do. And here are the very many different ways. Really cool. There are some like coral ones and some slimy ones or cup ones. And there are ones that more look like our typical mushrooms that we think of that produce spores and reproduce through the air. But one of my favorite stories is a different kind of way to be a fungus, is in the form of lichens. And lichens taught me so much. They're one of my favorite fungal lessons. They are actually where the word symbiosis comes from. Symbiosis was used to first describe lichens as when they looked at them under a microscope, they noticed there is an algae cell and a fungal cell. They're like, wait a second, there's like two different kingdoms of life in here. And then they found also bacteria in there too, cyanobacteria. So in order to describe this new organism, they had to come up with a new word. So symbiosis, literally meaning in Greek, living together. Sim, together, bios, living. And these beautiful organisms are a mixture. Here's some pictures of them from Malibu Creek State Park, but you can find lichens everywhere here in the Southlands in Southern California. They eat rocks. They're some of the first organisms to have evolved to live on land, to break down our terrestrial Earth millions of years ago, 450 plus million years ago, and they created our soils. They're the only real organism I know that eats and break down rock like this. It's so interesting. And the algae in there and the cyanobacteria, they eat sunlight. They convert sun into food, into sugars, in return with the fungus for structure, for housing, and for nutrients, for fertilizer that comes out of those rocks that algae and other living things need to live. And we'll kind of see that when we think of mycorrhizal fungi, when we think of trees that need and plants that need fertilizer and water and other things to live that they can't get all on their own. But yeah, this Tales That Fungi really teach us about how to live collaboratively. I really love one of my favorite biologists, Lynn Margulies. She described symbiosis as the intimacy of strangers. Moving on here. And here's a kind of moving on to like kind of what we think of more as like common mushrooms here. Okay, actually we skipped one. So I wanted to talk real quick about this little plant that you'll see here. up in the mountains, around 6,000 to 7,000 feet. Here is up Mount Pacifico and the San Gabriel Mountains, but you'll find this all around. This is called a snow plant, Sarcodes sanguea, and this is a plant that lost its ability to eat sunlight. And they instead of eating sunlight to produce food, they have figured out how to hack the mycorrhizal networks, but underground, and not necessarily that we know give anything back substantially. So this is a parasitic fungi that is red because it doesn't have green chlorophyll, and it's this oddest, strange plant that I've really found. I remember like John Muir found it when he was on his escapades here. It actually brings people from around the world to come see these. But so this is just an example of a plant that associates with a mycorrhizal fungus here. You'll see all the pine needles. This pine tree has a mycorrhizal fungus partner that this snow plant knows how to hack into and siphon out sugars. So yeah, so many different ways, symbiosis we can see everywhere we look. So kind of showing into kind of what we have, like more of our common mushrooms. You'll see here's a beautiful picture from my friend Juan when we were out looking at mushrooms. This is a common one you'll find in your lawn, a shaggy parasol or Chlorophyllobruneum. Really beautiful caps. But yeah, you can really find, I kind of want to familiarize folks with who are these mushrooms that you'll encounter in your lawns and around. Here's another really common one that was just right across the street from me, the honey mushrooms, or Armillaria malay. Here I live in Alhambra, California. And yeah, just slowly eating away, decomposing a tree here. Really beautiful. Armillaria is part of what you may have heard before, the humongous fungus, one of, if not the largest living organism in the world, up in Oregon, and perhaps one of the oldest too. But there are so many different also colors and really beautiful. I love going out and encountering a new mushroom I've encountered before. Like this one I encountered the other day near Malibu, called the amethyst deceiver. And I couldn't figure out what it was at first because it changes color from purple to brown. So interesting, hence the name deceiver. Another really interesting, so many different ways to be a fungus and to mushroom. These little black elfin saddles, so peculiar. They look very alien, very brain-like, but they're also a mushroom. Their Latin name, Helvella dryophylla, signifies Dryophila in Latin, meaning that they love fungi or love oak trees. They're oak associates. So an example of another mycorrhizal fungus here. One really cool, doesn't look like I updated the name for this one, but the coral fungus here, Bioclavina myceliosa, is another fun one that you'll find around. Little coral, looks just like something from underwater. Really beautiful, surprising finds in the oak leaves. Really love all the jelly fungi, the textures that fungi can have. I really love how much fungi engage all of my senses when I go out. And I love greeting these mushrooms, saying hi to them, smelling them, tasting them. You can always touch a mushroom. You always can say hi to it, like these. Can feel very slimy and bouncy. Really interesting. I was just so surprised by how many different ways there are to be a mushroom when I started getting into fungi. Oh, had a black screen here. And then there are also mushrooms that are underground. Really interesting. They're called truffles. It's a common name you may have heard. They're the most expensive, most sought after mushrooms in the world. A delicacy by some, but not all truffles are edible. There's just some in from Italy or southern France. But here is a really interesting one that I found up in the San Gabriel Mountains here that smells like apricots and was the color orange and so strange. Like my friends and I actually thought it was like a rotting Nerf ball or something. We didn't think it was an actual mushroom. And when we picked it up and we took a little cross section here and looked under a loop, little magnifying hand lens, we noticed these beautiful structures and textures. And we were like, wait a second, that's absolutely a fungus. And yeah, it just smelled like nothing else. And I haven't been able to find a species of this yet in any of the truffle books. So perhaps it's a new mushroom. And that's one thing also so surprised me about fungi when I got into this further and further was how little documentation there is of fungi, how over 90% of the kingdom is undescribed species. So there are just loads and loads of discoveries and more information to be learned about. So yeah, this is probably a new species of mushroom that we encountered. Another little truffle that we found, little Goteria, really interesting. We cut it in half here with my mushroom knife, and yeah, really interesting, like sandy texture. But there are just so many mushrooms underground that escape our vision that just surround us. And you may have heard, like, for truffle hunters who find like the edible ones that go and sell them in Italy, they'll like use a truffle pig or a truffle dog to smell them, because that's how these truffles rely on some kind of animal or something to smell and eat them and then spread their spores. Really interesting. It can be really smelly. Yeah, sometimes mushrooms are also really small, like these little tiny hemimycena. I love the small mushrooms. We get a lot of small mushrooms here in Southern California, and they just, yeah, these guys look like little ghosts. They're so cute. And we also have our really small fungi that use insects to reproduce. So here is a favorite of mine, Bovaria. It grows on a ladybug. I found it on a ladybug up in the mountains. Here's a little zoom in, under 40x through a hand lens. And this is a fungus that uses an insect to spread its spores to reproduce. They are understood as like ecological population controllers. So this ladybug, for instance, was perhaps a little, not in the right place, and there was too many. There's an excess. So this fungus comes through and balances out that population. And I found these and they're called entomogenous fungi really interesting. It's so interesting that my friends and I dressed up as different fungus loving or fungus living or fungus reproducing for a costume for a parade at the Telluride Mushroom Festival. Telluride Mushroom Festival is the largest mushroom festival in the world, especially in North America. It is really something special. And for this, we dressed up as, my friend on the left is the fly death fungus. Next friend is a cordyceps, a moth as a cordyceps, and I am next, and I'm Bovaria. I'm that like kind of bug that has all of that fluffy fungus coming out of it. And then my friend is a cicada, which this Massospora fungus uses cicadas to spread its spores, and their butts fall off. It's really, really interesting. Here's another look of all of us in the community. And I really love the community that I've met through the fungi world, how people are so creative and artistic and are really interested in larger connections. Seeing how fungi teach us that all life is connected in some way. But yeah, that was really cool festival. But all sorts of different cool fungi up in Colorado. We have just kind of showing the fungal diversity that I never knew existed in the world before my travels, such as this Western giant puffball that was the size of my head. And these really delicious porcini mushrooms, Boletus edulis. And we've got different, they have the white elfin saddle up there, kind of another brain-like mushroom, but it's white, and really cool eyelash cup fungus that has some slime mold growing on it. But I'm gonna skip ahead here. One of my favorite encounters was this bleeding tooth fungus that we actually have here in Southern California too, called the Hynellum peckii. And when it's growing, it has these little red beads of sweat, or guttation, as it's called in mycology. And these are just like us when we're working out. They secrete like a sweat. And it's, in this case, it's red. It looks like it's bleeding. And then when I was on another fungus travel in the Pacific Northwest, I encountered the bleeding Bluetooth fungus. This one's blue instead. And what I love to do is to use, how I learn about my mushrooms is to use iNaturalist. It's a free app that you can use on your desktop, or download the app on your phone, on your smartphone, and you can upload your observations to it. And we'll get to that in a second, but there's really cool things that you can see on this like iNaturalist app to show like the distribution of a fungus, where like this bleeding Bluetooth fungus I saw only lives up in the Pacific Northwest, and this bleeding red tooth fungus lives all over North America. And this observation gives us so much data and information about where they live, and in order for us to, in the future, conserve it, to protect it, to get to know it better. You may have noticed that there really aren't mycology departments or very many mycology scientists that you've heard of. Much of the field is done by community scientists, done by amateurs, who do this without being paid. Sorry, you take a drink of water. But here, all of this information has been collected by community scientists, by citizen scientists, and really help us contribute to greater understandings. Yeah, really interesting. You can find mushrooms all over in Southern California. They'll be in your lawns, and a lot of them hide underneath leaves and debris and soil, and they create these little mushrooms that they slowly peek up and come through. There's an example of a mushroom, and underneath that was a subalpine waxy cap up in the mountains. And I posted this on iNaturalist, took some pictures of it, and I posted these pictures on iNaturalist. Some friends identified it, took a selfie with it because I was really excited about it. And I learned that, oh, hey, this was like the southernmost observation of this fungus. This wasn't on iNaturalist, documented this far south before. So it was really cool to see that happen in action. And mycologists and people who are more well-versed in identification go on iNaturalist and will identify your pictures and give them a name. Here's another. I really love this mushroom. It's actually an edible mushroom. We had a fungus camp, and we found a bunch of them, and we had them for dinner. They taste kind of like a really good fish. Here's a really great diagram. I can post this link, share this in the chat after I get done speaking. Just how to take a picture, how to take a photograph of a mushroom, and for identification. It's not so straightforward. You need to take a picture of, there's 3 real photos you need to take a picture of for us to identify. One is in its like location, like is it growing on a tree stump or on the grass? What is it growing on? And then a picture of the mushroom cap to show like what it looks like on top. And then the mushroom, a picture from underneath, or the spore surface, we call it, where they have like gills or pores or teeth. Oh, thanks, Melanie, for sharing that link in there. This is really helpful and gives you kind of more information on, yeah, you know, what does the mushroom taste like? What does it smell like? What is its texture? Really helpful things to start learning how to identify mushrooms. And there's so many, I really love the smells. So many different smells of mushrooms. Here's a mushroom odor wheel from the Alabama Mushroom Society. And yeah, we get a lot of vegetable smells with our oak trees here. I get a lot of cucumbers, but I don't know, I smelled one just last week that smelled like rotten eggs or sewer gas. It was not a good one, but yeah, sometimes they're really fruity, sometimes they're really sweet, really pleasant. They're always so interesting. So for me, finding and going out and meeting mushrooms can be really grounding, engaging these senses once again, just to take a moment. And I mean, every mushroom is different. It's just such a special occasion when you meet these mushrooms, because these mushrooms here, these California mycenas, this one's a more popular one, but you know, they only come up so often, every so often. Maybe this is the only time, this one time a year, that this mushroom or fungus pops up to spread its spores. Here's a really good example of a good picture to post on iNaturalist for identification, actually. So I included it here. And another example of mushroom, good shot on the left here of like showing the mushrooms from underneath, showing its gills. These are really important. But yeah, sometimes, you know, people don't think of Southern California as a mycologically diverse or fungal diverse area, but we actually have a lot of mushrooms, and sometimes they get ridiculously massive, like this oak-loving tricholoma. It's mycorrhizal with these oak trees. And these oak trees rely on these fungi to survive and thrive. I heard over 50% of the sugars of these oak trees will go to these mushrooms. Just really, really impressive. But yeah, you can find mushrooms wherever you go. Here's an example of some two little mushrooms. See here, this is how I found them. I knew, I was like, in those wood chips, there are mushrooms underneath there. And sure enough, I go and brush them off, and there's an agaricus mushroom. These are, this is the family of button mushrooms that you'll find in the grocery stores. And yeah, fungi are everywhere. I was so surprised that I still get so surprised that I find mushrooms when I go on a walk, or I learn that there are fungi that help us digest food, or you know, new ways of fermentation, or you know, the limits. Seems like fungi are just in about everything we do. Here's a really cool some fungi here, found on a walk the other day. More bird's nest fungi, these little cup fungus that produce what looks like eggs. That's how they spread their spores. These little spore dispersal eggs packets. Some more of these bird's nest fungi, really pretty. They grow on, here's on the left is a pine cone. They are about everywhere. And earth stars are another common one. And these, they get their name because they kind of grow from the ground and they form a little star shape, and they secrete their spores when you touch them or when it rains, and it shoots out a puff of smoke of all of its spores. Yeah, just more fungi you'll find a lot in wood chips. Great places to look is in landscaping. Here is the chip cherries, red little mushrooms that are pretty common. And yes, as Melanie said, please, we'll have some time for questions here if you add them to the Q&A. Love to hear your questions. Another common urban mushroom we get here in Southern California is chicken of the woods, Litiporus gilbertsonii. Really alien looking, really different, really yellowish. kind of goldish too. They can get really large. They grow on dying trees, and on some trees they are actually, people like to eat them. But for some people like myself, they actually give me an upset stomach, so I do not partake. But yeah, really love, here's a really cool find that we had this fall, where we're under some trees and we found this large fairy ring. You can't quite make it out in this picture, but I'm sitting in the middle of a large fairy ring of leucopax, large white leucopax. And they do this because, as we were seeing in earlier, mycelium, when it grows out radially, and at the ends of the radius is where the mushrooms will produce. So naturally, will wherever it starts out, where from its like food source, it will reproduce all of its little mushroom bodies. Really beautiful mushroom. And as you can see, big old smiles were had during that. But yeah, fungi are really, they're some of the most ancient life forms on our planet. They a lot of insects love them. Here's actually a flower at the Huntington Gardens that we found that looks like a marasmius mushroom that evolved to attract fungus gnats. Fungus gnats spread spores for some other fungi and spreads pollen in this case. Really interesting biomimicry example. But I just wanted to end on, kind of went through a lot here, but I want to end on one of my favorite desert and beach fungi that I encountered here in Ranchos Palos Verdes. This large, scaly, stalked puffball. And this is such an interesting fungus that you can only find down here in Southern California, that are really, really popular, really prominent, where the spores are on the outside, on the top, on this really woody stem. Doesn't even quite look like a mushroom. And I kind of dug a hole here to see how far it went under, and it went, I mean, probably like a foot down. And here along the beach, it was really windy, and sure enough, when my friends and I, we took a closer look, I actually blew on it here. And maybe Paul, if you can play the video, we can kind of see what happens. Sure enough, when I blew on it, the spores dispersed everywhere. We were like, what? No way. This is incredible. Never had seen a mushroom like that. Usually the spores are inside or not exposed. But this mushroom is just waiting to be blown and dispersed into the wind. But yeah, I kind of just wanted to end on that note. Really just say that mushrooms and fungi give me so much hope. They've brought a lot of connection to my life, met a lot of really inspiring people, really great friends. And yeah, I love fungi. Can talk about them all night. So yeah, any questions? Love to hear from folks, your experiences.
Yeah, we do have some questions. Thank you so much, Aaron. It was really fun to listen to, and your passion for fungi comes through so much. I've been interested in mushrooms and fungi for a lot of years, but I learned so much tonight. So thank you. Thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, super fun. Let me go ahead and ask a couple of questions and see if you can speak to a couple of things here. You mentioned iNaturalist as being a really good resource. Are there any books in particular that you recommend for someone getting started learning about fungi?
That's actually how I got into fungi, was through the book. What really solidified my passion was the book Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake. That book is more about just fungi in the large spectrum of things. Everything from psychedelics to ecology to kind of larger picture things like climate justice and stuff that I'm really passionate about. And it intersects with one of my other favorite books kind of about fungi as well, not directly, but has a few chapters on it. Robin Wall Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass. She talks about how fungi can teach us to be in better relationship with the land, and how they, yeah, kind of the stories of lichens I kind of briefly mentioned. But if you're interested in identification, I really like mushrooms of the Redwood Coast, or California mushrooms. Yeah, those are, I like pictures. So those are two really good picture books.
Cool. Thank you for sharing those resources. Other question. Can you speak a little bit to how fungi or funga, I'm not sure which word to use here, can help in ecological restoration that's occurring?
Oh, that's such a great question. And that's something I didn't touch on too much here. Is actually how I've been working on like a region-wide conservation project called the SoCal Funga Project. So so we think of fauna and flora, like the plants and animals of a place, but what about fungi? So there's the word funga, popularized by Juliana Furci of the Fungi Foundation. She's my favorite scientist. So including funga wherever fauna and flora are mentioned. So we're educating people on how to do iNaturalist observations. We're bringing collections to a UCLA fungarium, because that's not a thing. People don't do a lot of collections of these, so other scientists can research them, or academics can research them, or the public. UCLA is a public institution. And getting fungi into legal and funding frameworks. It's incredible how little funding and attention fungi receive. Less than, yeah, it's like it's a really small percentage of fungal or biodiversity conservation goes towards fungi. But as we're learning more and more, all life depend on fungi in some manner. So yeah, I'm really passionate about educating folks on the conservation part of it, and getting funding so we can research more. It's
Very
amazing
cool.
how little we know.
Another question here. If we find mushrooms around, what is a good way to treat them? Is it okay to pick them? Should we leave them alone? What's the protocol?
That's another really great question. Oh, I love that. So I follow, like I said, one of my favorite books is Braiding Sweetgrass, and in Braiding Sweetgrass, she has what's called the Honorable Harvest, and it's kind of a traditional ecological knowledge way of interacting with our more than human neighbors. Like, should we pick that? So if there's not a reason for me to pick something, or to other than to admire a fungus, I leave it be. But if I'm going to use that fungus for research, or if on the rare occasion I'm going to consume that mushroom, I will pick it. But yeah, very try to leave. I don't know. I think it's totally fine to say hi to it, to get to know it, but I think it's really, we don't know the effects of mass foraging and yet on fungi, on mushrooms, and we don't even know the effects of eating and consuming urban mushrooms. We know that they pick up pollutants and poisons and other things, so it may not even be healthy to consume them. So yeah, there's a lot of fungi are really receiving a lot of attention at the moment, but not a lot of conversation yet about how, what's our relationship look like how to be in good relationship with them.
So much still left to learn, huh?
Right.
It's amazing. All right, another question. Does fungus, or I guess mycorrhiza in the soil, need to be replaced after a big fire?
That's a great question, and it's one that um it depends. There are fungi that actually wait for fires, that have evolved to live for fires here in Southern California, like our morels and other fire followers. But yeah, some projects are actually using fungi to clean up um, burn areas, but I have not heard of fungi needing to be replaced or to be reintroduced after fires. I think a lot of development, a lot of disturbance. You may have heard like tilling. Tilling kills fungi when farmers go and break up the soil. But fungi are really resilient. They have survived all of the mass extinctions events. Like they'll be around longer than us. We're finding mushrooms in Chernobyl. We're finding them in extremely polluted sites. And there's actually one of the first studies of fungi being used to clean up soils here in Los Angeles through UC Riverside by Danielle Stevenson. It's called mycophytoremediation, where she's using fungi, mycorrhizal fungi with native plants from like the Theodore Payne Foundation to clean up the heavy lead and diesel that has been left over from train operations and car operations, like repair shops, and cleaning up that soil for it to be used in the future.
That's very cool. Actually, there was a question here about micro remediation. I had heard of phytoremediation and micro remediation, but I did not know that somebody's combining them. That's great. Very interesting.
Yeah, right. It's working together. Yeah, there's so many native, like using native oyster mushrooms along the Los Angeles River. Yeah, her work is really, really, really huge. I mean, we've been like microremediation isn't a new idea, but there hasn't been research on it yet.
Very interesting. Okay, I think we have time for just one more question here. Here in Southern California, or maybe even more specifically, coastal Orange County, we have a scaly stalked puffball here you found right near the coast. Are there any other notable mushroom species that we should be on the lookout for near the coast here?
Gosh, there are a lot of desert fungi, a lot of puffballs, a lot of fungi that like uh the ocean layer, the marine layer, that will just kind of keep things more humid. Actually, along the coast, it's you'll find a good deal of fungal diversity there, um, because of that. So yeah, check your lawns, check when you're out for a walk. Um, Go along on a walk with some kids. Children are very good at finding mushrooms. And post your finds on iNaturalist and get to know who lives around you.
Aaron, thanks again so much for your time and your knowledge. Thank you for sharing that with us. We'll start closing up here for the evening. Thank you, everybody, for coming and participating in this. Just a quick overview of kind of what we're doing here with Benny Ranch Conservancy. This is the first of 4 webinars that we'll be offering this year. This first one is on fungi, and we'll also be learning about coastal issues and endangered bird species along the coast and some other topics along those lines. We have 2 monthly volunteer events. If anybody is interested in joining us, we are at Fairview Park, right there by the parking lot every 3rd Saturday. We're adopting a little plot there for native plant restoration. And it's very easy access and simple to begin with, and mainly for us in the community to learn more about what native plants are here and what the restoration process might look like in different areas along this Santa Ana River coastal corridor, the tidal influence zone here. And then, so that's the 3rd Saturday of the month at Fairview Park. And then the 4th Saturday of the month, we are at the beach and the river mouth on the Newport Beach side. I don't know if you can see my mouse here on my screen, but this is where we meet for our beach cleanup every 4th Saturday from 9 to 11. So if you scan this barcode here or go to this link, you'll find information about those 2 events. Those are monthly. And then just keep watching for the next webinar coming, I believe, in June. And thank you again to Mercedes for interpreting for us in Spanish. And we hope to see you all again at the next one. So thanks a lot.
Thank you so much,
Have a great
everyone.
evening.
Have a good night.